Welcome to Everything Under the Moon.
With Mel and Stell. Hey, Mel.
Hey.
It's been doing any squatching lately?
I don't know. How about you? Well, that's a dumb answer. Yes. How about you?
I've also been squatching.
Yes. So we have we have started our Squatch investigations. I like to call it investigations because that makes it seem sciencey.
Absolutely.
I think we mentioned in our last episode at the end a little bit, but we have a research area at Stell's. It's a family property of Stell's.
Shout out to my good old Papa.
Pops.
Poor guy. I hope that it turns out that it's not Lyme disease and that it was a case of the Mondays.
I believe that Pops will be okay, and I'm so grateful because we wouldn't be here without him.
Rest up, Pops.
Let's talk a little bit about our very first time going out squatching. We have made videos. We've been vlogging during all of this, but, podcasting is our forte right now, so we want to do some with that too. But our first camping trip to the forest, we should give it a name, our location, but we can think about that.
Yeah.
It was quite grueling. We literally hiked up a 1,200-foot incline that probably was about 100 yards.
Can we just call it the Holler?
Sure, the Holler. I like it.
Okay.
But this first time we were not in the Holler. We were on top of a ridge.
Right.
So we walked, because the hiking trail, obviously goes through the Holler.
Mm-hmm.
You should talk about that spot, because it's your spot.
So, basically there are basically the remains of an old ATV trail that used to go through there, that no longer does. The story that I was told when I was a kid, because it blew my mind that there was a trail out there, because it is for us to get there, first of all, we have to drive about an hour and a half and then hike another 1.5 miles into nowhere to get to this place. So to imagine that there's just this trail out there was really mind-blowing to me as a child.
Yeah.
But what I had heard was that illegal logging had been taking place in that area. And you've seen it, you've been there many times now. And, there's some huge trees out there.
This is an old growth Appalachian forest.
Yeah,
this is the type of wood that you could cut down and sell for thousands of dollars. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. So what the Forestry Service did in order to preserve that forest is they cut down some huge trees. They sacrificed a few of the big ones to lay across the path and essentially keep people from walking on it and let it grow wild again. And it's been fairly successful. Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. It has reverted back to nature's way. I don't want to dox us too much, but I think it's a really cool part of the lore of the place to say that it is near and was maybe a part of the Sheltowee Trail system, because that's huge.
Within a 1/4 mile.
Yes.
So we're maybe within an eighth of a mile. We're talking nothing, shouting distance from the actual. And our theory is that they actually, at that point, they shifted that point of the trail and just moved it, because it clearly looks like it also coincides with when they were doing the rebuilding of the highway that's in front of it now.
And there are trail markers.
Yeah.
All up there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I hadn't at that point. I hadn't been out there for 15 years at least, and I remember the trees being fallen down, but there being a very well cut path that you could easily follow all the way around the ridge. If you just hop over a few trees now and then, and I know on the side that we haven't been to just yet that my dad if you're going up to the Holler, you and I were going up the right. If we go up to the left, we're going to see where my dad actually cut through huge portions of the trail and made it open again just for himself.
Anarchy. I love it.
And we actually, another cool thing, we did see my dad's chainsaw marks on one of the logs when we went up there.
Yeah.
All right. So,
you have to do the thing.
And we're back.
Thank you. It's not right. It's like, you know, if someone does da 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 without doing the end. Da da.
I wasn't gonna
Before you get into like your really personal history with the place, that the Sheltowee Trail has a really cool history. I guess it's supposed to be Daniel Boone's trek through Kentucky as he was exploring the wilderness. And Daniel Boone had his own Sasquatch sighting, which is super cool. We should do like a little mini cast maybe where we just tell that story. But
I love that
this
idea.
area is so freaking squatchy. There's that historical account. Then there's the 2 BFRO accounts, like literally within not even double-digit miles.
Explain BFRO, please, for those in the back.
Bigfoot research. No. Yeah. Big.
What it is,
when I try to explain acronyms, I forget the letters.
But at least what it is, yeah.
Well, I'm getting there. I just got to get the words out of my mouth. Bigfoot Research Organization is all it stands for. And started by Matt Moneymaker in the 90s, who I think is maybe I shouldn't say that, not so reputable. But his organization is reputable, I think, and it has a life of its own now. There's one in every state, and they do investigations, basically. You want to hear my opinion of them?
Yes.
I kind of think that the BFRO is a pay-to-play organization these days.
I would say most are.
Well, what I've heard from the people I was affiliated with, I'm just going to say it, fuck him, Tom Shea and his buddies, who ghosted me and kicked me out of their Squatch group with no warning. They knew, you know, Cliff and Bobo and Matt, like all these people from the show, because he was on Finding Bigfoot, which was their show. They basically told me that you can go on any BFRO investigation if you've got an infrared camera or a therm. Like, as long as you can buy high-priced equipment, they'll let you come because that's what they want to find evidence. And they know that it's just a numbers game. Like, the more people in the woods with thermal cameras, the better chance there is of finding one. Mm-hmm. But it just seems scammy to me. Like, I'm not going to pay $400 to go on a retreat. I don't know. It just seems scammy to me. But
I think there's a big difference in what we are doing and what they are doing. Like, not to say that I can tell you like what their motivations are, but just that it's probably not the same. I want to find Bigfoot for myself and for no other reason. Like, if I found it, if I saw and had a personal Bigfoot encounter myself, then I wouldn't care if anyone believed me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't care if I had anything to sell to like Getty Images. You know, like I wouldn't care about being famous or any of that. And I'm not saying that that's what they want either, but the reason, like, it's really fun to broadcast these and like do our podcasts and everything, but it really is for our own personal posterity at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I can't imagine this ever being a thing, you know, where I would like accept a TV show offer, you know, and I totally get that people who publicly like do their Squatch, like what you're talking about, like who put their names out there and try to get like known for their evidence. I think they have good intentions when they start out. Like, they want to prove, they probably had a personal experience and they want to prove this phenomenon to the world. But I'm pretty cynical, and I don't think that showing anything to the world is going to get us anywhere. I mean, how much evidence have we shown the world already? Like, the PGF, the Patterson-Gimlin film, is like the most conclusive piece of Squatch evidence. That's what makes me a believer, is the Patterson-Gimlin film. And people still don't believe.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the one where they actually broke down the gait of the creature and actually said that a human being could not be imitating this because we can tell from the mechanics of how this Bigfoot walks that they have a different shaped calf muscle.
Yes. And you can see muscles rippling, you know, in the video. It's impossible for that to be a man in a suit. And I think what a lot of people forget is that the footage you see like on YouTube or TV, those are copies of film. And when you copy film every single time, it gets worse. And we have actually lost the original Patterson-Gimlin film. Did you know that? The original film is gone.
I believe it, because that's just the case with so many people. Were so careless with their media back then.
Well, Roger Patterson, the man who filmed it,
their stuff so much.
He died a couple years after this event. I mean, he had cancer, or Hodgkin's lymphoma maybe. And so it went to, it just got passed down the line. But so what people see when they're like, oh, there's a guy in the suit, it's so blurry, it's so grainy, I just want to shake them. Like, the good copies of the PGF are amazing. And so I can't even imagine what the original looked like.
And with you mentioning that the original footage being lost, that's another aspect of Bigfoot that's totally brand new to me that you seem like you're really in the know about. And that's that weird things tend to happen to the evidence that you collect. And like there's a few different theories on that, ranging from the paranormal / physical or metaphysical to something that like an actual sensitivity and able to interfere with electronics that could be biological as well. So is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's something going on. I mean, I've heard it a ton, of course, like people are recording something and their batteries go dead. It reminds me a lot of like ghost shows, which like ghost shows like Ghost Adventures and Taps were like my introduction as a child to the paranormal. I think like ghost stuff was the first thing I really got into. And they always have, I mean, that's always a thing, right? Like, oh, our batteries died, they were full. Like, can't tell you how many times I've heard that on a ghost special.
It makes sense.
Personally, this happened to me when I was out with Shay and his group of people. I found a really convincing piece of evidence. We were hiking up a hill and there was a stump kind of along a trail, but that hadn't been used in a long time. And there were actually branches like pulled down over the trail, which is a little squatchy too. There's a theory that they do that to keep people out of their space.
We saw tons of that, didn't we?
Yes, we saw tons of that in our Holler. But I found on a stump a hickory nut that was still green. And the top of it had looked like someone took was holding the hickory nut with their thumbs on the bottom and their pointer fingers on the top. And it looked like they'd stuck their fingernails into the top of the hickory nut and pulled it apart. Like we peel an orange. Yeah. Like when you peel an orange, you like rip it apart. You've actually shown me
this picture. I remember now. I remember seeing this on the stump. Yeah. And it did look really, it looked like someone had just played with it.
Yeah. It looked like they had pulled it open, eaten the hickory nut, and just left it sit. Mm-hmm. Like they didn't care about discarding the evidence. Those pictures are gone. I
saw that picture.
I showed it to you.
I had no idea you were going to say that.
And they're gone. You saw them. They're gone.
I saw them. They existed.
They're not on my old phone. They're not on my phone backup. They're not on the USB that I still have all of my Squatch recordings and pictures on. There is nothing to show that ever was seen. So I don't know. And I mean, Tom told me when I found that, he was like, that's a Squatch. I mean, it was just so evident. And have you ever tried to break open a green hickory nut, like a butternut hickory?
I have not.
They're about this big, and you can...
Like a golf ball?
You can't. There's no way a person can rip them open with their thumbnails. I mean, you would break your nails off. You'd have to crack it with a
They have a pretty... Yeah, like they're like... It would be about like trying to crack a huge nut open, right?
The rind is at least an inch thick on hickory nuts.
Yeah, I got you.
And they're the ones that like when the nuts fall apart in the fall, you find like the canoe-looking pieces on the ground. Yeah. Have you ever found those? Like, yeah. We called them canoes, and we'd throw them in the water. Oh. But that's what I found, and it's gone. So I don't understand. It didn't disappear after it happened.
I know
it disappeared a year later.
After our first trip with the evidence, which we're going to tell that story coming up later, so stay tuned in. But I know on our first trip when I went to go look for some of the pictures and video, this is the weird thing. So at first I thought it had been erased. And you were like, yep. That was just your reaction. Yeah. Like we were on our way home and I was like baffled. I was like, what the heck? Where is this stuff? And you were like, yep. And this is what happened. Somehow these several pictures and a video that were in the middle of the roll of like pictures I took on our trip. Mm-hmm. Only those somehow uploaded themselves into my Google photo and stored themselves online and erased themselves from my phone so that I had to actually go into my Google photo and come across them accidentally. And
we thought they were gone for a whole 3 days.
Yeah.
Like we just were like, whatever, F it. We'll just have to re-record.
Because those random like 3 or 4 items like picked themselves up and erased themselves.
And I wonder if they're, so I mean, I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I think that Squatches, if they're real, I think they do have abilities to like alter electromagnetic fields and that kind of stuff. And that has been proven to be a thing that we do with our brains. Like they have studied mediums and psychics and put, stuff. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
They put stuff around their heads. And when people are doing their psychic medium stuff, their electromagnetic fields around their brains change.
That's pretty cool.
We know that humans give off an electromagnetic field. I mean, that's what we call energy and vibes.
And like, if you want to go even more hardcore skeptic, because like that's what I like to do. That's my trauma. Thanks. Hi. But for even the more scientific among us, to claim that a Bigfoot may have the ability to either like pick up or alter magnetic fields is not so different than senses that we already see present in some animals, such as the magnetoception of cows, cow herds. There are the electric eel is able to create electricity like outside of its body and shock you. So it gives you kind of a biological basis to see that, these things could very well be possible.
Yes, it's so common.
It's just not even out there.
No, I mean, birds have a specific, like if you look at a wild bird, those like holes they have, that's not really for smelling. Those are called nares. And they are what help birds detect the Earth's magnetic field. Like that is how birds orient themselves. Yep. That's how they migrate across the Earth. And it makes total sense. I mean, all animals have this, bears, dogs, to sense it.
It's the same amount of, it's just like infrared too. Like there's some animals that can see completely in infrared, but yet there were thousands and hundreds of thousands of years when we didn't know that infrared existed.
Yeah.
But yet there were animals that could see that.
Exactly. And I always want to like shake people who don't quite get the idea that, the natural world, we don't determine the order of the natural world when we do science. Science is us going out and saying this happens, we're going to call it this word, and we're going to try and catalog it. But there is so much about the natural world that we don't understand and that we might never understand because we didn't come up with it, yo. Like, we don't have the outline. Like, I want to shake people so bad who don't believe in anything paranormal because I think it's human hubris to think that we know everything about our natural world when, like, you just, well, see,
there's even feelings that we don't have words for. Like, what would we do without the French? How would we describe déjà vu?
Or like all those German words like Schadenfreude.
Yeah, those are the best. I mean, but like, so just because there's no word for it in our language doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, just because it's not written down in your textbook from the 90s doesn't mean that something doesn't exist. And right now I'm specifically ranting about an old coworker I had who was just like, thought that like everything was fake ever and that reality was just the way he saw it. And
well, that's called solipsism.
Well, it makes me a little sad, first of all, because you've lost your wonder about the Earth and the world. Like, this is an amazing place to live, and it's cool as shit.
It also relegates you to an NPC status.
What's NPC?
A non-player character. That's like when you're playing a video game and you go into the store or you go to the inn and you talk to the character.
Oh,
and it has a
like
pre-scripted thing.
Don't.
Yeah. So that people who believe in solipsism or like that really that they are the only thing that they can know to be real.
Main character syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what depresses me is for someone to negate my personhood that much when I'm willing to assume that they're real.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's super offensive. But if you come out and say, oh, I'm offended, then you're the crazy person, right? Like you're absolutely the crazy person.
That's what I love about you, Mel. You're willing to say I'm offended.
Thanks.
No matter like where we are or what's going on. And I appreciate that about
move.
You. Yeah.
Women have to be able to stand up and say they don't like something, or else what did Betty Friedan do for us? Or Gloria Steinem? Anyway, let's get back to our outline, our very, very short outline.
Oh, well, actually, so we were talking about some of the characteristics of Bigfoot. I think the next thing we should talk about is like, as we go into the Holler, what sort of things are we looking for? What sort of things would we expect to see if our hypothesis is that this is a Sasquatch area?
Yeah.
Up to, like short of actually catching one by the toe. Like what do we expect to see, and what features exist in the holler that make you feel that this is a really good place to start?
These are great questions.
Thank you.
First, I want to just say before I even start answering that I think the holy grail of evidence for me, myself, would be to see one. Because it's like you said, I'm just doing this for my own personal. So if I walked into the holler and saw a Squatch, I'd pack up and go home. Not in a scared way, but like that's it for me, right? Like they're there. So I just felt like I should point that out because
So that's not, to me, I feel like that's the beginning.
it is the beginning for sure, but my curiosity would be satisfied.
Got you.
Maybe not. That's a lie. But something would change. I just want to say that because I'm about to say why I think the holler is squatchy, and I don't want people to think that I'm like making a mountain out of a molehill. And this is all just, my knowledge, I guess. I'm not an expert on Squatch by any means. But
Specifically, Mel, I'm asking for your opinion.
Oh, of course. Sorry. I'm just rambling now. I'm who I be. The first thing I think that really looked squatchy is just the terrain. I mean, these are ridges that you cannot hike up. I mean, we hiked up a less steep one, and I almost about died. I mean, that was rough. I got bit by a bunch of yellow jackets in the middle, which probably didn't help. But so the terrain is super squatchy because it's very dense. It's old growth forest. It's not inhabited. Like your dad doesn't even hike back there anymore. And it's a part of a huge national forest, so it's protected. And it's been there for a long time. So all of those things point to me to if a Squatch is in this area, if it's an animal seeking to survive, these are all great places that make it a good place to live. And then there's the physical.
We also saw the blackberries too.
Yes.
There's blackberries and
plenty
blueberries.
of food. I mean, we saw at least 3 types of berries.
And we know for sure there's bear up there. We saw bear scat and bear tracks.
Yeah, there are. I mean, the forest can sustain a large predator, is what that means.
Exactly.
There's plenty of deer. We saw tons of deer tracks. Plenty of small mammals. I wanted to get to this a little later, but we did find like a small pond.
Oh, yeah.
That had been made, like there was a log jam and then it flooded and created a natural pond. And that is awesome. I mean, that means they have water. It's not necessarily super fresh or clean, but who knows if Squatches, they might be like dogs, where they can handle more bacteria or they've got something.
I mean, if that's their habitat.
Physical evidence, I think, is number 2 that makes the holler feel super squatchy. There are lots of sapling trees that are broken off about 10 feet up. And they were alive when they were broken. You can tell that because of the way the wood splinters. I have a degree in ecology, and I taught in the forestry department at my college for a couple years. Not telling you, I'm just trying to back up like why I know about trees.
Yeah,
this
it's
is
like
the one thing I can actually
people in the
speak
back,
on.
like I say.
Yes. But I think at least 2 saplings we saw, at least, that we took pictures of, but we weren't searching for them either.
Right, they were just in our face.
They're right there. And the theory among Squatchers is that those are either communication between themselves or a warning to stay out. And it would make sense to me that that's a warning because it's right next to the human trail. It's right next to where your dad and the dogs walk up that trail all the time.
Yeah, it's like almost saying like, this is like, don't go any further. I think it would be most likely that given the situation that there's like a dog pack at my parents' house, like, and they've got plenty of room. So, they roam free and they're happy and healthy.
And it's a
great.
rescue. We should say, like, they're
rescue.
not hoarders. Like, they rescue dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
Like,
awesome.
I just think, I always look a little sideways when I hear someone has a bunch of dogs, but we're
exactly.
specialists.
But they live on a farm.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
there's room.
But it would make sense that where that sapling is broken, that it would represent, go this far but no further, because there's dogs, like there's a dog pack. My mom said that those trees broken, those saplings that are broken like 10 foot high, are a way of one Bigfoot's message to another Bigfoot or to any other animal that says, I'm this tall.
Yes.
So you just better know that before you mess with me,
don't
is
F
that
with me.
I'm this tall. How tall are you, buddy? How big a boy are you?
And that's just it. Like, since we don't know anything about Squatches and how their brains work, we don't know if they're acting in an animalistic way like that, like a purely like, I'm here, this is how big I am, fear me, or if it's a complex communication system between themselves. I think the third thing that makes me think the Holler is super Squatchy is the energy there. We have to talk about that because we're witches, and I believe that there's more to Squatch than I don't think this is a lost great ape in the forests. I think that this is a paranormal phenomenon that comes into our space or reality or whatever the crap you want to call it when they deem that they want to. And I've heard from a lot of people that you can communicate with them in your mind, and I've always wanted to try that. That's what I'm trying to achieve, is just a comfortableness with the place before we do that. But you just get the feeling. I mean, I don't know how many times we said to ourselves hiking, both weekends, we went 2 weekends in a row, both weekends,
Yep.
we looked at each other and just went like, we're being watched.
Absolutely.
Right? We're definitely being watched, or we would get the feeling that we shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. And so we wouldn't, and we're very good about that. And then other times there's the feeling that you're being invited.
Yeah.
Right?
And I get this sense too that it's almost like a privilege. And this is just me speaking off like my gut or my intuition, and so take it with a grain of salt. But I get the feeling when I go in there that whatever that energy is, like, recognizes my energy signature.
Yes.
And knows that I was like a child of this land, that I grew up in this area, and that I belong here, essentially, like just as much as they do.
Absolutely.
And I feel that when I go in, but I also get the sense that other people may feel very differently.
Yeah, and I guess those people will see on the vlog, we both act so differently. Like, I'm so cool and calm sitting here in the studio, but there's something primal that my body does when I'm in the forest at night, and it's not just this place.
Yep.
I've been outside a lot, and there's always, I just think that my reptile brain in there knows that I should be careful no matter what is out there. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like afraid by the fire. I'm like, don't you dare tell a ghost story, like, no. And Stell's just like, man, this is chill, like, because you grew up there, and I do think that you form connections with spirits of the land and
the
land itself.
I feel like, if anything, like, I blend,
and it's of your blood.
Yeah,
like, that's so powerful. I do think there's something powerful about the earth you come from.
And I mean, another thing too is, like, I spent my adolescent years in that forest, and like the angst and the
that scared the shit out of me, I'm not gonna lie. We should just say that's Stella's phone notification, aka Mario.
Yeah, it's Mario going okie dokie. Because in my experience, there's a chance the recording might not have even picked it up.
Oh,
because like it's weird. Like, anything away from the microphone tends to not make it into the recording, no matter how loud it sounds in the room. But I was so like angsty and adolescent in those years. So like those times that I was like out wandering in the woods, I remember like it was moments of existential crisis and like, what is my purpose? Where do I belong in the world? And also, I don't mind to say that like I struggled with depression, like even really early on. So I also just had this sort of like existential pain that I felt like all the time.
And that soaked into that place.
It could be, but I feel like that it's almost like a trauma bond. I feel like it adds to the strength to the bond.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could definitely see that rubbing off on the place for sure.
And, it all changes at night.
And I was going to say the degree to which you change at night at the campground is surprising. It's not necessarily even bad or anything. It's just surprising that one's demeanor can change so completely. It's like, I can tell that you are incredibly brave, but you put all of your energy into being like incredibly brave.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know if shit goes down that like you're exactly the kind of person I would want to be there.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I know that you're going to like keep cool and act. And you also know that sometimes you have to shout in my face like specific instructions. If it's like,
That's
if it goes,
I
tend to be, you're like so fight, flight, or freeze. You're fight, I'm freeze. Sometimes, not every time. Sometimes I do like act, and then sometimes it's bad.
And sometimes I freeze too, but rarely ever do I flight.
Yeah. I wish I would flight more often. That would be my favorite. It's optimal.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, just run away, bitch.
Yeah. No, especially like when that log broke that you were standing on. Like, I should have just ran away.
Did you run away?
No, I caught you.
Yeah, you caught me.
But your demeanor does change like a lot, and you get a lot more serious, I think, is the difference. Like, you become a serious person and like much less likely to laugh at a joke, but also not like a bummer either.
Good, because serious. Sometimes I do feel like a bummer. Sometimes I do feel like I'm just being a wet blanket because of my fear. And I wish I could say that something horrible happened to me in the woods at night that makes me afraid, but I've spent all my life in the forest and plenty of time in the backcountry, way more secluded than at the Holler. It just
feels heavy back there, though.
And I just absolutely know in my bones that I am not the most powerful thing out there. And I cannot even fake it. You know, I like something about my body will not let me, and that plays a big part in my spirituality. That is why I think that nature is the root of all things, and that like I think that's why I think it's so important, because I could feel it. I could feel the importance and the heaviness, and when darkness falls, it's like I know I just have to sit around the fire and be safe. There's something primal that kicks in.
Yeah, and it's just the fact that you're not a nocturnal creature. Like, human beings are not nocturnal, you know? So when night falls, like, it's our instinct to like sit by the fire and stay still.
And stay in groups. I mean, I wasn't even walking away to pee. At one point I peed like way too close to you.
Oh yeah, I was totally worried that the spray from your pee was gonna like hit me in the face.
It didn't though, right?
No, it didn't. No, but it was that close. I think I looked at you and I was like, dude, and you took another half step back.
Okay, so this was in the middle of us. Oh, and I was pregnant then. That makes sense. No wonder I was peeing every 2 hours.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, I distinctly remember that was when we had just heard that what sounded like a rock being thrown down the hill.
Which I actually wanted to stop you right here, and I think we should tell the story of our 2 nights now in order. So, first weekend. Mm-hmm. The first weekend where we are figuring out like who we are as Squatchers.
Sorry, I just want to throw in,
yes,
from a information perspective, this has been mid-July, hot, humid, long days. This is the type of environment we're in. So,
yep, absolutely. And this was like a really hot day, and it had stormed pretty hard in the middle of the day, but it was really like some like Florida weather, to be honest. It was like hot, an hour of like raging storm, and then hot the rest of the evening to the point that it all dried back out again.
See that? I don't know. That reminds me of home.
Yeah.
Southern PA is almost the same climate as here, so I'm just so used to it. But
so this was our first time going out. So the gear that I have no gear. I'm completely new to it, and although I used to have like a full suite of camping gear because I used to love it, like from after I graduated high school, like into college and stuff, I really got away from people and friends that like to camp. So I ended up just like slowly here and there, like gifting my camping stuff to people that would enjoy it, because I never got, well, thanks. Thank you.
That is a sweet thing to do.
It's just not fun to do alone.
Yeah.
You know, like, so, and I didn't have anybody to carry it on with. So that's why another of the many reasons I'm glad that I met you, Mel.
Oh, you too. Still.
Thanks. And, you know, so it's a lot of like figure it out as you go. Mel's trying to outfit me with like whatever she can, and I'm just making a mental note of like things that I need to get for next time. I think I had like a headlamp that we got, and so we go out there, and it's like kind of mid-afternoon. It's pretty hot going back. One of us is wearing about maybe 50 pounds.
Yeah, with the pack.
With the pack was about 50, and then the backpack was like 35 to 40.
Plus our camp chairs that we carried like idiots.
Yeah, and they weren't even camp chairs. They're like the big outdoor leisure chairs that like they do fold up, but they're like twice the size of like what I think of when I think of a camping chair.
For sure. But we didn't have any other, we were trying to be minimal.
Right.
We didn't bring a tent. We just brought a tarp to cover us up.
Yeah.
And so it was either that or sit on the ground.
Yeah. So we had, the way that we ended up going is that each of us had like a chair strapped to us and either the pack or the backpack. Mm-hmm. And so we started, trudging straight back into the holler, following the creek until we get to the first of several places. Like, what am I trying to say?
It's a wash.
Yeah, the first wash. And then I look up the steepest side of the hill and I tell Mel that it's that way. And she, with all of her experience and knowledge of topography, agreed to do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it would be hell.
Yeah.
But that was what we set out to do.
And we did it, too.
And we fucking did it.
Even though. Mm-hmm. So, I know at...
There were like 2 times hiking up where I was like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, and I was thinking that I had killed us. You can see the anxiety in my face. Like, we stopped to record a few times, and like you can see like in the tightness of my eyes that I'm actually worried that I've completely like screwed the pooch.
Yeah, you thought that you lost me. Like, you thought I was never going to talk to you again and hate you.
Yeah,
but it was a great ass time.
I get pretty dramatic sometimes.
That's fair. It's fair. On the way up, about halfway, I had a really dumb moment for someone with the education I have, and here's the thing. I just have to excuse myself because it's such a stupid story. I got my degree in Iowa, where there is tall grass prairie, and they do have yellow jackets in Iowa, but I didn't get my ecology degree going out in the Appalachian forest every day. Right. So there are some things that from childhood I don't remember, like that yellow jackets can make their nests underground. Mm-hmm. Like, how did I forget that? So Stell's ahead of me, like 10, 15 feet up the hill, which is a lot. Like, that was taking us like 3 minutes. And
every 2 feet we were doubling in altitude.
Yes. Yeah. So I stopped for a second. I don't know what I did. I think I still had my pack on, right?
Yeah.
And there was a rock. I still thought it was so cool. Like a triangular rock set in this like kind of round bump of moss, which I know now was the nest underground.
Right.
But it looked like something had set the rock perfectly in there years ago, and the moss had grown around it, which is why I picked it up. I just thought it was so cool. So I pick up the rock and I look at it and I'm like, cool, put it down. And under the rock appears to be some mycelium, like underground mushroom fungus. And I freaking love fungus. So of course I had to touch it. And I reach out real slow I had like my nails done. So I remember it wasn't even my finger that popped it. It was like my acrylic nail. And my nail popped it and I hear bzzz. And I see at least 3 immediately fly out at me. Oh. And my brain, this was a flight moment. My brain went, bees, ah! And I ran up the hill right to you, and I was like, run, bees, like I was freaking out. Actually, my knees were touching my chest, like I was running.
Yeah. You somehow were running, and remember, like, I don't know, for all the elevation nerds out there, like I said, we're doubling in altitude every 2 feet. That's how steep this grade was. At some points we had to climb.
Yes, with our hands and knees
because you can't stand up or you'll fall over. Mm-hmm. And I now remember that I had the pack at that point.
Okay, I had the book bag.
Yeah, and you had the book bag. So you were running up at me. I'm watching this whole thing, and I see you look up at me and you say, run, bees, run. And you say it, the way you say it to me is, I could tell the second one, the first time you're trying to warn me, the second one, your tone was like, are you deaf, you dumb bitch? I said, run. And I remember looking down at you, and I have like both of the chairs and the pack, because I'm trying to,
you have the heaviest stuff.
Yeah. And I would estimate that probably I had about like 70 pounds total on me. And I'm on this steep incline, and I'm watching you running up to me, telling me to run. And I'm looking down at you, and the only thing I'm thinking is like, I'm going to get swarmed by hornets. Like, because there was nowhere I could go. There was nowhere to run. I was too exhausted to run anyway. And so you make it up there and you immediately, I throw down my pack, you throw down your pack, and you were like, I used my hat to beat off like the four that had followed you. Yeah. Like, you know, and you killed one behind your back.
Oh yeah, I slapped
you
that
did.
motherfucker.
You slapped it and you killed it and you were like, where is it? And you wouldn't stop
because
moving.
I felt the sting, and I actually thought that it was like repeatedly stinging me because logic goes out the window, right?
Yeah.
But
and then you were like, after that happened, you were like, well, okay, I might be allergic. Okay, well, I guess I can die. and you're shredding, like going through the backpack, shredding, so basically like tearing through it.
I had a first aid kit. I am a good backpacker, and I always have a first aid kit. But I did not have, of course, I don't have an EpiPen because I'm not actually allergic to bees. My mother was deathly allergic, and she kind of traumatized me and made me think that I would one day magically turn allergic. Like, she always tells me that. She's like, be careful. You might get stung and die.
My mom did the same thing about peanut butter.
Yeah, like
she's deathly, like, she's the one, like, if she's on the plane, they're not going to have peanuts on the plane.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's serious.
And so I was just, I hope you know I wasn't saying, I guess I'll die out of anger. My thought process was literally like, well, you are here, and that is what will honestly happen. And stating out loud that I could die on that hill made me feel better. Because I'm stating the unknown, right? And I don't know if you know this. I don't have any fear of death.
I learned that, actually.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't care. Like, we die when we die.
I would say, if anything, you're slightly pissed about it.
About dying?
Yeah. Like, that's kind of your reaction. Instead of being, like, afraid, you're like, ugh.
Like, I gotta
sucks.
die. Well, the pain's gonna suck. And that's mostly what I was sitting there. That's why I said, I guess I'll die. I was picturing my death, a horrible asphyxiation death, you know, where I'm swollen and you have to sit there and watch me die. That was what I was thinking about. It wasn't my own death. It was the fact that my best friend is going to sit here on this hill and watch me die. And that had to have been traumatizing. And then you were like, bitch, I'll carry you down.
Yeah.
You were like, I was like, just leave me here. Like, honestly, just go get some help. Leave me on this hill. Like,
no, I
belong to the earth.
I know myself. I can't say I know I would do this, but I really believe in my thigh muscles that much that, like, if called upon, I really do believe in my own beastitude.
The
that
adrenaline.
I would fireman carry you down. Like, no problem. I would just, like, I don't even know how to fireman carry. I just figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, it just seems like you just get, you know.
Just get them up there by their legs.
Exactly. Like, and I'm pretty sure that I would probably, like, jog with you like that.
I mean, it was scary, and but I'm not afraid to die. I mean,
so at that point, we're halfway up the hill.
Yeah, that was halfway. Okay. So I had at least 10 yellow jacket bites. Most of them were on my feet because I wore chacos because I underestimated this hill. And so I had a bunch of my feet and back and arms.
Right. And I didn't want it, like, I didn't tell you at the time, and I'm just repeating for the sake of the story, but, like, when I saw what was actually chasing you, I was like, this is going to suck, but these are essentially like sweat bees, basically. Like, they're not, you know, that it's not going to be,
kill me.
But it is going to suck, you know? So, like, not, but I was just like, you know.
And you told me that, which was nice. I was pissed about it because I have rejection dysphoria. Thank you, ADHD. But you were right. So what I did, I just chewed up like I think I took 4 all-day allergy pills. Like, and I chewed them because I thought that would get them down faster.
Like Zyrtec or something.
No, basically
the green
is
one,
what they are.
The green bottle.
They're like the off-brand because I'm cheap.
Cerdazine or whatever.
Yes, because I write the scientific names on the baggies, which is what you should do. Pro tip for a first aid kit, because if a paramedic needs to know what you took, they will know what that is. And I stung. I mean, I was miserable the rest of the night and stingy, but I didn't die.
So at some point, I know, like, towards the last bit, like, somehow you rallied and helped, like, got up the rest of the way. And, like, I took both of the chairs from then on. But at one point, I was like, you had gotten way on ahead, and all you could do was just stand on this rock on this steep climb where you can't come back down to help me, because then you risk getting yourself in a situation again just by returning. But all you can do is just watch me, and I'm army crawling, and I actually I was on my hands and knees with a chair in each hand, and I was actually using, like, the weight of the chairs to like pull me up the side, and I felt like Mulan, and like I was singing like, let's get down to business
to defeat the Huns.
And I mean, I would like, I just felt like, you know.
Yeah, I think my adrenaline kicked in.
Yeah.
I think the adrenaline kicked in and was like, you're fucking here, you're halfway up. You're not. I refused. I mean, there was one point before the yellow jackets, that I was like, we need to stop. We need to camp here. But that was a shitty campsite. I mean, we're on the side of like a mountain that's at like a 60-degree angle.
And there's like this thing where like this optical illusion where it looks like you're approaching the top, like for the whole second half looks like the top is just 10 feet away.
We kept saying we were so close. Yeah.
But, you know, and it looked like it was. But at that point when you said, let's camp here, I think I pointed up and said like, there's the sky. Like I can see the sky. Like that's gotta be the top. And you rallied and made it the hell up there. Like I salute you for that.
Thank you. You too, girl.
Thank you.
We did that shit. So we get to camp. I set up our tarp.
And what does it look like up there?
It's really interesting. It's like the side that we hiked up was the very forefront. If you imagine, I'm always visualizing topo maps in my brain. If this ridge was almost like a finger coming out of the top of the ridges of the mountains.
Right.
And so we had like come up on the tip, and so when you walked up, it was like you were in an amphitheater. Like everything is like the trail is round.
Right.
And there's like a center part that is like, I mean, it was covered in berry bushes, blackberries. And we
Blackberries.
had a great blackberry dinner.
Oh yeah, we did.
But it was very wild. I mean, there's trees on like obviously cut down, and then
you saw the trail.
There's shrubby growth. The trail is there for sure, but there's shrubby growth taking over.
Right.
And so we just decided to camp like in, I think, the most open spot right on the ridge.
And you could see that it was still an ATV trail, no?
Yes.
Like
you could
still
see the
had
tire marks.
tracks.
Yeah, you could definitely see it. Like I said, fire is really important for my mental well-being, and we didn't get any evidence collected that night because we were just trying to survive. We ruined a couple batteries trying to make a fire, but we could not get this battery and dryer lint to light. And I just think that was fate. I just think we weren't supposed to have a fire that night.
Somehow neither one of us had a lighter, you know, of all the times that we've been camping. I mean, and you more so than me too, but I mean, I've done it enough that there's no excuse for I should know. And it was just bad luck that you would happen to like be doing something in your bag that made you like remove your waterproof matches, your survival matches.
Yeah, I cleaned out the first aid kit.
Yeah. Your solution ended up being pretty creative. Like once, you know, you kind of came to terms with the fact that like, we're not going to have a fire. We're not going to have a hot dinner. Like we're not going to have hot food. We're not going to have light, protection, safety. You opened up your MacBook and put
I forgot about that.
Put the Yule log.
Yule log goes scrap. That's our favorite.
She put like a YouTube video of a fake fire. And then she set it in the fire pit so that it looked like we had like a little movie fire.
Yeah. That was also I could fall asleep because I knew I just had to go sleep.
And like it, you know, I was worried about you still, like mostly I was worried about you mentally because I knew physically you would be okay, but if mentally you felt like you were dying, then that's all, you know, like that has a powerful effect on how you feel and what you're able to do.
For sure.
So I wanted you to definitely go to sleep, which this then leaves me alone.
So tell everyone what you saw after I fell asleep.
Well, I had been trying to create like a nice little atmosphere so that Mel would feel better. So while she was like messing around with the fire and stuff, I was like hanging up glow sticks and like making this little vibey like mood lighting kind of thing.
And we did have a lot of glow sticks.
Yeah, we bought a lot because they were like really cheap at the Dollar General.
Half off, baby.
Yeah. Shout out to Dollar General.
Yeah, that after 4th of July sale.
I love them because I don't have to go to Walmart sometimes. My mom had told us to get those things because those bright colors and stuff attract Bigfoot. And I wasn't like in my right mind clearly thinking. But basically what I ended up doing was dressing up my friend's sleeping area as like a bright neon sign. Like, come here, come check this out. And it's like I was using her as live bait. Which, would you have been pregnant then?
No.
Okay.
I was pregnant the next weekend.
Because that would have been even better.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say I was pregnant. There was an egg floating around in there, but it wasn't doing anything.
It's really interesting to think about, isn't it? Like what was going on.
And the fact that we had a lot more evidence the first time and not when I can't wait until I'm big and round. Like, I want to go squatching when I'm obviously visually pregnant.
Nice.
Because I've just heard a lot of anecdotal stuff about like pregnant and nursing mothers getting a lot of Squatch activity because it makes them curious.
That's so cool. And maybe at some point too, we could have like one little one and one pregnant one.
Right?
It'd be so cool. So that night, my gun jammed, and it's the first time that it's ever happened.
What got on it?
I think that a bag of grapes.
Yes,
like that's my theory, because somehow like I pulled my gun out of my pack and it was sticky and like literally sticky and stuck together. And shout out to my husband for cleaning it and oiling it up for me again, so it's in tip-top shape. Yeah, so big appreciate. I don't know where like, okay, I'm just talking about.
I remember falling asleep. Okay. I also had my gun on my lap.
Oh yeah, I borrowed your gun for a little bit.
And I put a bullet in my chamber.
Yeah.
Which I don't do unless I intend to kill something.
Right.
I am a huge gun safety nerd. Guns are not toys. Guns are not for fun. Like I carry that gun in case of emergencies, and I never put one in the chamber. And my gun, I have an MS Shield that has like a back grip safety even. Like it's, so what I'm trying to say is like this was a big deal for me that I felt the need to have a loaded gun on my lap. But I remember falling asleep, and I remember waking up twice. And the first time I woke up, you were shining your phone.
Yep, it was my phone light that seemed to wake you up.
Yeah, and I immediately came to it, which you were impressed. You were like, can't believe you're awake. But like, that's my instincts. And it happened again. It was like, the second time.
I swear it was like the little click sound of my light coming on that woke you up. And it was like such a quiet sound.
As we're having this conversation, and I'm just like realizing that I very much do change completely in the woods. I just wonder if there's like a genetic trait that I've got that makes me more predisposed to being cautious or on high alert in the forest. Absolutely. I mean, because if you woke me up in bed like that, I would not be with it. But I remember turning my head, talking to you for 30 seconds, like I was fully aware, and I remember it. And
so the reason why I turned that light on is because I heard a huge crashing sound really close to our camp. And it was after I had heard some whooping.
Yes.
And the whooping sound that I heard, I'm not saying it was a Bigfoot or anything. With none of this am I saying it is. I'm just saying what I heard. And the whoop sounded a little bit different than what I expected, which actually makes me believe it even more. It sounded like woo whoop instead of like a whoop. Which is, I expected it to be more like a whoop, whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
But it was like a whoop, whoop.
I don't know. I might have told you this too, but I've definitely thought it before. So the Sierra sounds are, you've seen the Missing 411, The Hunted, from the 70s, where they record the conversations. In my opinion, it's really hard evidence. He basically, I can play him for you. Maybe we can pause it and I'll play him for you. Because I think that was recorded in the Sierra Mountains in California. And I believe they're real for a lot of reasons. But my theory is that is a Western Sasquatch accent. You know, and that is where our knowledge of whoops come from. Like that film was the first recorded whoop.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. And so now everyone's thought is that they're like whoop. But you heard maybe, you know, an Appalachian
I would say,
Squatch.
You know, like I was expecting a WOOP and I got a WOO-OOP. I heard that whoop, and I also had this feeling. Later on, I learned, like my mom told me, that there is a history of Sasquatches being on our family ranch in Montana. That my great-grandmother called them ridge runners. They didn't call them, And so we were up on a ridge, but there were ridges also to our left and to our right. And I had this feeling like where we're sitting and we're kind of in this, like, what am I trying to say? Like a 3-point
Yeah, it's where the ridge comes to a point.
Yeah, we're like at a
overlooking
point.
the hill.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so I'm like archipelago or whatever. I'm like trying to, whatever that word
like a
is.
peninsula.
A peninsula. That's the, thank you. A peninsula. So I could hear on either sides of the peninsula, it sounded like there was whooping. I had already felt like I could hear knocking sounds and like loud sound, crashing sounds, and like maybe even almost like a chuckling that I had heard on left and right, but it was far enough away that I was like, whatever this is, it's not right on top of me.
Yes.
Like it is not, it wasn't like when I turned the light on.
Yeah.
And this was before. So I already had this feeling that like we were being watched on several sides and that the groups were communicating to move in closer and updating each other. It's almost like they started out far away on different sides and they were like, okay, I'm going to go around this way. You go around that way. And then like, you know, just judging, because I could sit here and try to describe all the sounds that I heard, but I think it makes more sense to like put it into like my narrative experience.
Yeah, to give your interpretation.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like, you know, but my experiences seem to be that these groups were communicating with each other and talking about what they were seeing as they got closer and closer to us. So to the point that I heard those crashing sounds, I fully expected that it's whatever I heard earlier had finally come through. Shortly after that, the bush next to your chair moved.
Yeah. Describe how it moved, because we've spent a couple of weeks now talking about this bush incident, and I'll give you my thoughts after you tell it.
It reminded it. Okay. I'll be honest, I told myself that it was a Sasquatch because I would rather think it was a Sasquatch than what it looked like, which it looked like a snake.
Okay.
Like the way that the bush was moving right next to your chair was like a slithering sort of like forward motion. Something is snaking through. It looked like something was snaking through the bush.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's...
And it happened twice, right?
And it did. It happened twice. That's what made me think it wasn't a snake after that, because it would make no sense that the snake would like go one way across camp and then
come
the other.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was odd, and I didn't wake up for that.
But I could totally see it being like a little punk adolescent Sasquatch saying like, "Look, guys, look how close I'm gonna get to him."
Which ties into the track you found.
Oh yes, and the next morning, I found my first track, and I was really proud of it because it was very degraded and old. Like it looked like it was at least from the last time that it had been made muddy.
Yeah. And it was a log had decomposed there, and so it wasn't in soil, it was in like a... Do you know how like when the log decomposes, it's like that spongy mulch almost?
Yeah, exactly.
It was in that, and so you can tell that it wasn't a perfect track to begin with.
And you can't see it well at all in the pictures, but actually my mom said that she could see it pretty well, but she said she could see it because she's used to looking for dirt that's been compacted versus dirt that's not been disturbed yet for her own like rock digging. So she said that because she looks at dirt all the time, she was able to look at like the difference of the compressed dirt versus not, and then was able to make out the print. Yeah. But I'll be the first to say it's very degraded and not that clear.
Yeah, and we have plaster of Paris with us, but we couldn't make it. There was no use in doing it because it wasn't going to turn out well enough. If it was a Sasquatch track, it was probably a juvenile. It was probably about the size, a little bit bigger than my feet. I'm a size 9. But there is absolutely no way in hell that was a human track. There's absolutely... That trail has been closed for 15 years.
Minimum.
It was barefoot. There's no way that people are walking around up there in bare feet.
Yeah, not after we climbed up. And we went and looked at a topo map, and there are slightly easier ways than how we did it, but there was nothing that would suggest...
There's no easy way.
There's no easy way up. We've actually been talking about maybe making a rope, like like hanging a rope to help climb up.
Yeah. And, you know, the possibility that someone is up there is highly unlikely. It's also blocked off. I mean, we couldn't walk on the trail. Like, there was only probably 30 yards of trail that was actually accessible to us walking because there were physical barriers.
Oh, my parents' property is the only thing even remotely nearby that is not like wilderness or locked by like a big river or something. Like it's just naturally like the way we go at it is like the only way to go without going way out of your way.
Way out of the way, miles out of the way.
Miles.
So I think that was the evidence. I think that was all of our evidence for our first trip. But we went home.
How long did it take us to get down the hill?
About 15 minutes.
At most.
And we scooted down on our butts a couple times.
Yeah, it was like pretty easy. It was like almost gross how easy it was like compared to how hard it was to get up there.
Let's take a little break. And then we'll talk about our second consecutive weekend where we also had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're back. Okay, so we just listened to the Sierra sounds, and Stella's having a moment.
I'm upset. I'm upset because it sounds so much like what I heard that I'm uncomfortable. And I'm really underselling how I'm feeling right now.
I can see the fear in your eyes right now.
I'm terrified.
I want you to know that feeling of absolute disbelief and fear and like gut rolling truth has happened to me before. Yeah, you're shaking. I almost want to make you listen to the rest of them out of like villain vibes. But
I had to ask Mel to stop because it was like too much.
So the samurai chatter, which is what they call it, which I think is pretty racist, low key.
Which is the chuckling that I...
Yeah, which is, I think, what Stella heard is chuckling.
And here's the thing, like you said that, like, what I heard on that recording was the WOO-OOP. I heard it on there, too. And that's just not what I expected it to sound like. It's something that I can understand. I can never bring this to somebody as, like, proof, but it's proof to me.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Can I tell you my experience, my opening, I think? Was when I was in Iowa. And, you know, for me, like, especially if I had Squatch evidence in Iowa, that was pretty hard-hitting because of how little forest there is there. But we were in a river valley, and we were doing an investigation at night, and we did a wood knock, and about 45 seconds later, we heard a wood knock back. And you can't convince me that a woodpecker was awake at 3 a.m. and gave me one resounding, you know? I mean, I just remember feeling my stomach sink, and it wasn't a game anymore. Before that, it was like a fun camping trip, like, ooh, we're going out at night to investigate. That gave me the feeling that this wasn't a game.
There was, this reminds me of like another aspect of that first night that we spent out there that I hadn't talked about yet. And that was going back to, I wanted you to go to sleep because I was worried about what you'd been through and like the mental toll that it might take on you. And like for some reason, you know, just like you think about fire and security, I think my first thought survival wise out in the woods is like how to like keep yourself mentally okay. Like that becomes like my main focus is how do I keep myself sane? How do I keep myself level? And how do I relax and persist despite difficult circumstances? Because I feel like when you lose your mind, like that's when you're lost. And I had to really deal with that. And I thought for your mental health, you needed to get some sleep. And also for your physical health, because you needed some time to like let your body work out some of those things and like actually heal. And that meant that I had to spend like some of the darkest night hours by myself, conserving my battery, thinking about, you know, like making sure that I'm maintaining a good balance of using my phone and not using it. We did have service, so I was lucky. And I texted my mom back and forth a little bit to keep me company, but I tried not to have it going too much because I didn't want it to run out of juice. And it's what we'd been recording with, so I only had like 30% left. And so I had set it aside, and I mean, it was just me staring out into the blackness of the forest for hours. And this is like knowing that at any point I could wake you up and that you could be there, you know, like, so it was my choice. But I just really had to like become confronted with terror and the way that it acts on the mind. And I mean terror as like a mental state. And how noises can start to sound magnified and everything, like my hearing became sharper.
Your animal brain kicks in.
Exactly. And like it's a completely altered state of consciousness. And I knew that I had to tread very carefully through that. That in many ways my mind would be my own worst enemy when it comes to like what's the most dangerous thing out here in the dark.
Yeah.
Probably my mind creating stuff is more dangerous than anything that's actually out there.
Right? Like,
so like, but that was like a real serious experience, like with terror for me in a way. And it never came to a point that I felt like was overwhelming. I felt like I'm not going to say that I was like, I mean, I was super brave for sure, because you can still be scared and be brave.
So let's contrast that with our second camping trip. Because our second camping trip, we were in a different mind space and we had a different experience.
Absolutely.
So our second trip, we decided to not hike up the ridge because it was kind of unsustainable. And we also were dead set on having fire. So we just stayed on the trail that was established by Pops, and he actually created like a little hammock village there that we set our hammocks up at. We went back. We actually dropped our stuff, went back with our packs and filled them up with wood from his shop. And so we had wood.
We were about 3/4 of a mile into the woods, but, you know, a very windy, kind of rocky.
Very secluded.
You know, 3/4 of a mile from anything.
Basically went as far as we could go on the trail before there was a log jam. That same log jam that created the pond we were talking about.
But at that point, no one in my family had seen what was behind the log jam.
Yeah, no one knew until you found it the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's awesome. We had plenty of firewood.
We had a camp stove.
Yep, we had a camp stove with fuel. We had bacon and egg sandwiches.
Oh, it was so
I
good.
mean, that was a totally different. And we were like right next to the creek, so we also had like a convenient place to like rinse and, you know, stuff like that.
And water that we could drink in an emergency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So I felt a lot safer. And I do think that we traded our safety for the evidence, because we did not get the activity levels that we got when we were up on the ridge.
But it was not nothing, was it?
No, it wasn't nothing, but you could tell they were up there.
Yeah.
That's where they were.
That goes back to, why did my great-grandmother call them the ridge runners?
That's a common thing they're called in the West.
Okay.
Not that your grandmother wasn't special, but
my family is the West. Like that's my heritage, like on my mom's side. So those are my people, like Tombstone and all that stuff. Sure. You know, like that's my family.
That is like a really common kind of backwoodsy, old-fashioned word for Squatches. And if this might just be my perspective from the media.
They were like her babies. She loved them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is like my perspective from the media maybe, but maybe not, is that when people call them ridge runners, they're viewing them differently. Because I'll be honest, I hate the word Bigfoot. I hate it. I think it's a white man word that we made up in the 60s. And each Indian tribe has their own word for them, but Sasquatch is like kind of the OG Northwest tribes.
I'm going to go with Sam Squanch for the win as my favorite.
Sam Squanch is the best. But people who call them ridge runners tend to have an attitude of like thinking of them as people and developing relationships with them and viewing them as more than just an ape to be studied.
I also am going to say that probably there's a good chance that my great-grandmother ascribed to the Sons of Cain theory, because she would have been a very devout Mormon. Okay. Because like part of that, my family there was like the beginning of the Mormon church in Salt Lake.
Yeah, and I hate that theory, low-key. Not to be offensive. No.
No, I'm just saying, like,
I think I had a rant about this like a day ago, that We just live in a Christian society, and people have got to view things through the lens of the Bible before anything else. It just shouldn't
necessarily be the default.
Exactly. It's the default, and that bothers me. But yeah, it's just awesome. And so I guess the experience we had that night, we heard a lot of things crashing around us.
And that's one thing is that you get used to that you don't hear at the top of the hill, but you do hear at the bottom, is that it always kind of sounds like it's softly raining leaves.
Yes.
So, there's a lot of little tiny drops.
Seeds were falling.
And seed pods, of course.
I forget what tree, because I identified the tree on the way out, but there was a tree in season that was dropping.
But that being said, you get used to that ambient sound. So
Stella essentially had something thrown at her. She had rocks.
At my hammock.
Small rocks hit her hammock by her head.
Yeah, which
and
would
we
mean
also heard
it would have to be coming from the side because
because we're covered.
I'm covered. So and it hit the side of where my head was, and it reverberated the sound just like if you had your head on a table and somebody came next to you and like smacked the table. Yeah. That's like what it sounded like. Yeah, it like rang in my head because it hit and echoed, and it hit me from the side.
And I remember when that happened because we were both laying in our hammocks. Like, we weren't going to sleep, but we decided to just chill. And I was fully awake. And I remember you were like all cocooned like a burrito. And you were like, dude, something just hit my head. It's fine. But something just hit my head.
Yeah.
And that is huge. Sasquatches for, I would argue, thousands of years have been known to throw rocks. And I was just telling you about, we're going to call it Astonishing Legends for the millionth times. They just dropped an episode about Sasquatch history. And I believe, I might be misquoting, but I think the word Sasquatch is derived from something that means like rock thrower. And like that is like a lot of the etymology of their name in a lot of different places. And it's just something that's kind of known that they've always done. And if you think about it,
I didn't feel like they were trying to like bean me or anything, you know?
No, it's a curiosity thing, right? Yeah. It's like us poking a dead body in a swamp. Like,
and it kind of felt like that.
I very much get all the vibes when I do that. It's a curiosity. And that's why I try to do the most to provoke their curiosity.
And I know that you and I had felt pressure drops happen a couple of times. I don't know if that could be a natural phenomena or what, but if you remember at least 2 different times, we both felt like a pressure change.
It was like when you dive down too far in the pool.
Exactly.
And your ear starts to hurt. And then it would go away, but there was still like a ringing almost.
Yeah.
Like it was like ultrasound or infrasound that they used.
I'm wondering.
It was like someone had a giant speaker on up at the top of the hill and it was hitting us.
I'm wondering too, like in the same way that bats use echolocation to find their way, that if by throwing a rock at something and listening to the sound it makes, if the Sasquatch gets more information than we do from that.
Maybe.
Like that maybe they're, like maybe they can hear the sound and like they get an idea of like what your body's composed of. Or like how much water's in you. Yeah. Or something, because they can hear the sound that the rock is making.
And it's like an experience thing.
Yeah.
Like they learn to know.
Yeah. Like
from hitting animals or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a thought.
It's totally a valid thought. It's one of the least outlandish Squatch theories there is. So yeah, you were hit with some rocks. Where our campsite is, we're in a creek bed, and there are hills to your left and right and to my front and back because of how our hammocks were set up. Exactly. So I'm facing the hill that we climbed up the last weekend. And we heard, I want to say at least 4 times.
Yeah.
We heard what sounded like either a tree branch being kind of like tossed
and
then rolling down the hill or a large rock. And
the loudest one I did not hear. Like based on your reaction, the one that seemed to be the loudest, you told me that it was the loudest thing you had heard all night. And meanwhile, I had just had the kind of sleep that just felt like I blinked. And I didn't sleep at all, but I'd actually been asleep for a while.
It definitely sounded like, and this is my interpretation. I want to say that we do make a distinction between, I'll describe exactly what I heard and then I'll give my interpretation. It sounded like something very large fell or intentionally crashed through brush on its way down the hill and then landed on something hard. And so in my interpretation was that I mean, my
So
very
it was like
first...
a whoosh bonk kind of thing?
But not a bonk. Like, it was a rock noise. Okay. And, you know, the part of the creek we're at, there are very large slabs of limestone. Mm-hmm. And so it sounded like, you know, maybe a Squatch had, like, jumped and then slid down the hill, you know, like for funsies, like on a sled, like, is what it sounded like. And then there was, like, quiet, and then like a real dull thunk. And it almost sounded a little wet.
I wonder if that was when the rock cracked.
Dude, that's what I'm saying.
Is that what you were going to say?
Because the next morning, so yeah, I woke you up because I was like, that's the biggest thing we've heard, right?
You didn't discuss this with me, this theory. Okay.
I thought we did the next day.
You just didn't, you didn't describe it.
There is a phenomenon where, like, while you're in the situation, you're chill and you don't think about discussing it, right? Like, you just take the evidence as it is, and then...
I could totally see not wanting to.
What do you mean, not wanting to talk about it?
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's an inherent thing that happens to me. Like, my brain doesn't think about analyzing it until I'm at home. But that next day, we are in the creek washing out our egg pan, and one of the large, like, slab stones that is literally, like, 10 feet away from my hammock had a huge crack in the middle, and there were like 2 parts where rocks were chipped off. And it was not there the day before. It was absolutely not, because I sat on that rock and filled up our water the day. I mean,
yeah, that was the source of our, like, rinsing water and stuff. So like we walked over it a bunch of times. That rock was not broken, and it wasn't easily broken either.
No, that was what made me scared the next day, was that, like, it didn't sound that close. If I had been guessing that night, I would have thought that it was maybe about 30 yards down the stream, as that's where it was crashing. But I think that was my nervousness.
Yeah,
throwing it off.
You seem to be, like, pretty convinced that those 2 things weren't related. It seemed like but I could totally see that being, like, avoidance of it.
It's hard to explain what happens, but you almost don't want to acknowledge because you're there and it's scary. Right? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
I didn't want to acknowledge the fact that something had probably landed 10 feet away from me last night and had seen me.
Yeah. Like,
and I didn't see it.
Yeah. And, like, the first night that we went, like, I didn't talk to you until the car. Like, I didn't talk to you about anything until the car.
On our way back, like 40 minutes into the drive, like a long time.
Yeah. They, like, didn't feel safe. Well, I think that that covers all of the things that we've experienced so far. And I just finished the last of that recording that you played for me of some Sasquatch sounds that were captured.
Sierra sounds.
The Sierra sounds. And I'm now, like, questioning everything because as I was listening to, like, all these different sounds of the forest, like that first night, there were so many things I was rationalizing, like some of the sounds to be like, oh, that sounds like a coyote. Oh, that sounds like some kind of night bird. Oh, that's an owl maybe. And now, based on those sounds, if those sounds are to be believed, then it sounds like the Sasquatch habitually copies a lot of sounds or imitates, like, a lot of those common forest sounds. So everyone, just when you go to sleep at night, remember that. You might think that it's a coyote, and it could be a Sasquatch. You know, all the things that we've experienced, and now I've listened to the Sierra sounds, I'm even more convinced, you know, that a lot of the sounds that I was hearing, like, could actually be incorporated into a Sasquatch experience. But on the second hike, on the second day, went for a walk up to the log jam, and I was determined to find a way around it. So I did. I climbed up and over, and it was only rough for about 30 seconds to a minute of, like, really steep, like a few steep steps, and then it's, you know, not a big deal at all. And you go around the hill, and then I got really excited, and I went back down, and I had to bring Mel up there. And when we went back up there, it's a clearing, and you can see that what has happened is a flash flood has, like, carved off, like, sheared off a part of the hillside. So instead of, like, having this canopy, it's just wide open, and there's short grass growing there, and there's a big like secret pond.
I didn't connect these dots until just now, but I think that's the only true delta I've ever seen. And it's not a true delta in like where a river, washes out, but it looked just like that. Like if it came from up the top of the hill and it washed out in like a triangle shape.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like a true delta.
The little pond was amazing. There were so many frogs, like jumping in and out.
Little air bubbles.
Yeah, we heard birds and ducks, and there was a lot of wildlife back there, and for sure squatchy. I don't know if I would drink the water, but I think a Squatch would.
Yeah, for
we
sure.
are hoping, I don't know how feasible it is if we want to take our hammocks, but we're hoping to go to that spot on our next investigation.
Yeah, because it shows because since it's been washed out and it's basically like a gravelly side of the hill, it's fully exposed and we can see our way all the way up to the top. Like we don't have to guess where the top is. And in a lot of ways, the rocks make like a natural staircase so we can kind of step up. And I even drug some big trees out that were blocking the way up the hill. So next time we would have a clear shot.
And I found some awesome fossils for my students.
Absolutely. And I've got a lot of them still by my TV while I'm thinking of it.
I left them in my classroom, and I think some of the other teachers thought I was weird, but I was like, you don't know how common these are. Like, I find fossils every time I go down to the Holler.
Yeah, they're
and
everywhere.
Sacrificing 4 or 5 for my kids to throw around in school is nothing.
Yeah.
I think we might be able to make it to the top through that clearing for sure, because it looked doable.
And you can see the top.
We got halfway up. I mean, we got halfway up
just
casually looking for rocks.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'm so excited.
And we're hoping, too, as the fall comes in, that there will be fewer deer ticks out there and that we will be able to get access to more of this trail that was grown over.
And more visibility. We'll have better visibility when the trees drop their leaves. I want to kind of comment again, if I can circle back to what you said about them imitating animals and like you thinking that you're hearing, whippoorwills or owls or whatever.
And not necessarily whippoorwills, but that just saying that it could be a bird because it reminds me of the whippoorwill's vocalizations.
Like thinking you're reminded of something.
Exactly, but it wasn't exactly.
Yeah, I wonder if there's if that's just skill we'll learn over time to, learn different sounds from the other, or if there's some type of technology that can help us learn. I'm just being curious. It's interesting.
This may be my own hubris, but I feel like now that I've stayed up through the night and listened to those sounds, and now that I've listened to the Sierra sounds, that I feel like I'll know the difference now.
For sure. Education is everything. And that's why I really do believe our instincts, because at its core, I think that we are products of the earth and we belong to the forest inherently. Modern humans think that nature is nature and humanity is humanity. All the time at work, kids will find beetles because our classroom is a big pole barn. It's a nature school, and they'll find beetles and they'll be like, "It's a bug!" Ah! And I'm like, "Yeah, but we built a school on this bug's home.
Yeah,
the bug didn't come into our home. We built it on top. That's our natural state of being. And so I do trust our instincts and our interpretations when we're out there. I want to talk a little bit about our equipment, because that's a lot of squatchers, I think, are just in it because they like being techies.
Right? They want an excuse to
to buy fancy stuff.
Hey, I can relate to that. It's my dream to have a metal detector. And thinking about also the fact that Daniel Boone came through there, which means that probably relatively a lot of other people came through there. Makes me think that we might really find something cool if we have a metal detector.
Right.
Something really cool.
Well, it's illegal in the national forest, so hush hush, but I won't tell on you. What'd you say?
I said shh. I'm talking about on my dad's property.
Of course. I'm not going to drag you out. Of course. So I don't have a lot of equipment, obviously, because we're not rich. It's expensive stuff. Kind of the holy grail is, like I said, the thermal camera, because you can see if something's walking around. I have a parabolic dish, though, that is able to record little snippets of recording, and we forgot some equipment last time, but we're going to bring that. That, I think, will help our ability to debunk certain sounds and focus on others more. We're also going to try to set up some recorders for like long-term recording. You can like hook up D batteries to a digital recorder and then just basically keep it in a waterproof thing. And I've heard
Make it motion activated.
No, it's just on all the time.
On all the time. Mm-hmm. I would love to go through. Yeah, I can't wait to start doing that.
I also think a trail cam would be great, although I don't believe that a Squatch is going to walk in front of a trail cam because I think they're smarter than that. But we should see what's going through the area.
I bet that they probably can sense electronics.
For sure.
I'm starting to become open to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that there may be something to the infrasound and that it's related to that.
That they're using an electronical type thing they have in their brain.
Yeah, that basically the infrasound could be a two-way street, like a echolocation again.
And it's interesting, we talked about the PGF, and that was with film. That was an analog camera. And did that have a different, what if we went out there with a film camera? Maybe we might see different things.
I wish we could have one that was like motion activated. Like something that just clipped a picture when something moved in front of it. I mean, you wouldn't need, that'd be like very rudimentary technology.
Mm-hmm. I wonder even if we could get like an old tape recorder.
We need a actual Polaroid camera.
And just bring a tape recorder to like run.
Yeah.
And see if we get anything different on the analog.
That's how I used to do like little paranormal investigations when I was like 12, 13.
Yes, tell them about the place you went because that's where inspired me about this.
This was many years ago and I don't want to give more detail than that because we were trespassing at the time.
Legit.
And it involves having to go through a cow field in the dark because if you go in the daytime, like they'll call the cops. They're like, the people that own that property now are really famous for like calling them. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go check out this really cool building, that's definitely worth trying to check out.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you intend to leave no trace and do no harm.
Yeah.
But, so we go out there and we're walking through this cow field in the dark, which is terrifying because these cows are like black, most of them. And some of them are like spotted, but you really can't see them out in the dark. So and now that I think about it, like that's so stupid. It was so dumb of us.
I don't think it's super dangerous, right?
I would just be afraid. Not a bull. Yeah, right. Like, but we didn't know.
Yeah, you didn't.
know, like it could have been, and like we wouldn't know anything, and like they're in the dark. And no one
would have known. You would have just died in a dark cow field.
Yeah, exactly. So we made it. There was a group of 4 of us, and the way that you have to get into the factory is climbing up the loading dock. Like you have to hoist yourself up and then roll under the sliding door because there's like a 2-foot gap in the loading bay that you can just roll underneath and then you're in the building. It is like a very creepy building. Like, and it looks like it has been closed off since like the 50s maybe. And some of the signage and stuff on the inside and the paint and like the style of lettering and stuff that was on things really was more reminiscent of like the 20s or the 30s. It was just so interesting. There was a lot of broken glass everywhere. There were a lot of old light bulbs in different styles and like tubes and bulbs and different things. Yeah, lots of broken glass, like I said. And there was a basement. And looking down, I remember I used to have a picture looking down into the basement, and you could see that it was half full of water. Like it was just flooded and half full, and like you could see the lights hanging down from the ceiling in the basement, and it just being like only a couple feet above the water.
Yeah.
So it looked really trippy. It looked like straight out of a Resident Evil video game. Like I remember thinking that it looked like something out of a zombie horror.
Yeah.
And I was recording on tape the whole time as we went through, as well as taking pictures. And on the way back out, there is one moment on the tape, like when we're really close to leaving. So like I've already listened to maybe an hour of audio, like of going in, walking around, whatever. And then at the very end of the recording, like towards the end as we're walking out, I pick up this voice on the recorder, and I really don't know who it is, and it didn't sound like anybody that was with us. And if I recall correctly, when I first listened back to it, it was my understanding that we were all in the dark, but I was holding the recorder in front of me and I could look ahead and see the other 3 people that were in my group. We were all together and I could see them in front of me. Like I was close enough to them to see their outline, but they weren't behind me. And the way that I'm holding the recorder, it sounds like this sound is coming from like over my shoulder.
Okay.
And it goes like,
oh, I hate that noise.
It was a horrible noise. And it's like the best I can do. But like it sounded like the most wheezy, ridiculous, like cough. It was like a maniacal wheezing cough. It was like a laugh from something that didn't breathe.
Yeah.
And
oh, don't like that.
so it's the other part. I'm almost done. And,
oh, okay.
so you remember me telling you how dark it was, like so dark that I could barely see my friends in front of me. And that was because there was no moon. And if there had been a moon, like a full moon out that night, it would have been too bright for us to go out and we would have been easily spotted.
Yeah.
So that's why I want to really emphasize that there was no moon in the sky that night. And in all of the pictures, like I took the pictures on my digital camera, but I didn't really like look at them until I took them back to my laptop and like uploaded them. But there was a big orb in the sky in every outdoor picture that I took that looks like if you saw it, you would just assume that it's the moon. Like you can see it over the building. And so there's just a moon in the sky in these pictures when in fact there was no moon at all.
Creepy AF. Yeah. Your anecdotal experience really makes me want to take some analog tapes out there and see what we get on analog.
I have a love for analog. I think a lot of people my age do. They have like this kind of like attachment to it, and it's the kind of stuff we used for stuff like that because that's what our parents had laying around.
I remember another podcast I listened to. There was these siblings who had a connection, you know, and it was about something completely unrelated. It wasn't about analog technology, but the woman makes an offhand comment about how when they had analog phones or like lined phones, she could always tell who was about to call. She didn't have to tell. And when I heard that the first time, I literally dropped a glass in the sink because I could do that. I can do that. If there's a landline in your house, like a corded phone, I can tell you exactly who's calling before they answer. There were several times. And so like I'm the generation, like we haven't had a corded phone. The last time, the reason I know I can do this is because I did it at school. That was the only place we had corded phones, you know, on the walls. Yeah. And there were several times where the phone would ring and then just in my brain, it just popped up like, oh, this person's going to the office or I'm going to the office, you know, and that's what happened. I predicted the death of my great grandmother that way. And it like, what is going on? Like, is that the electromagnetic connection that we don't understand, you know?
I think that that's an avenue or an angle that we could pursue that other people aren't pursuing right now.
Yeah.
You know, I think that that's like another way to look at it. Like we could actually do similar side-by-side comparisons of like things like this is what the digital captured, this is what analog captured.
For sure.
This is what they both captured at the same time.
That would be awesome. Let's do it. Well, we have so much more to learn. And we are going to collect as much evidence as we can. I came up with this while we were talking, so I hope you approve of it before I say it. But I think that we should officially release our talk about my squatching experience on our Patreon.
Okay.
We had a long talk about the group of investigators I used to go out with, led by Tom Shea in Kentucky, and it was generally a negative experience, and it really shaped how I view squatching, and I mean, it's pretty juicy. I got in a fight with a guy.
Yeah, it is. Like, it is one of those times you weren't afraid to say that you were offended.
Yes. And our Patreon right now is $3 a month for all patrons. We're not doing that tiered stuff yet. So $3 a month, and you can get access to some exclusive episodes that you can't get for free. So
don't forget, guys, if there's anything that is on your hearts and minds out there and you want to reach out and tell us about it, you can email us at tellmelandstell@gmail.com. That's 1 L in Mel, 2 L's in Stell, tellmelandstell@gmail.com. I'll be really excited to read emails. And I'm going to be honest, and of course, because we're just starting out, I haven't even gotten an email yet to that email address.
Not
so
even
whoever,
any spam.
so like somebody could email and just be like, in first.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like,
and we'll
could
call
be
you
the
out.
first one. Like, we'll make you a part of us.
Most of the people I meet in daily life who I talk about this to are women. Like, we always meet women out in public and we're like, oh, she's got the vibes. Like, she would love our podcast. And we talk to them. And I just want, if you're listening out there and I like called you out in a store or something for your cool tattoos and gave you my card, please like email us and you can hang out with us. Like, we are not snobs. We are normal ass people. And we want people to have this experience with us. Like, and if you're cool and not a serial killer, you can come out in the woods with us and have your own experience. We're all about the community.
I love it. And, you know, if you don't want to email, like, that's okay. I'm still having fun.
Yeah, we don't care about you, actually. Well, check out our Facebook group at Everything Under the Moon podcast fan page. Make sure you rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And check out our Patreon and our YouTube page and our Instagram. All of that is under the handle of EUTM podcast, Everything Under the Moon podcast with Mel and Stell. Thanks for listening, guys.
We'll see you next time.